Welcome to Generation Flex. I'm your host, Melissa Donaldson. On today's show, we talk about the look and making good first impressions. Actor Ashton Kutcher famously once said, "Always roll up your sleeves on your shirt. It gives the impression that you're working even if you're not." One way to interpret such peculiar advice could be that how you show up, specifically how you look, will create an impression for others that is either positive and inviting or negative and repelling. But how does that work? And are there certain rules for certain people, professions, or situations where surface appearance can make or break a desired outcome? My guests today are ready to dive right into it. I'd like to welcome to the show baby boomer Wendy Lewis, CEO of Wendy Lewis, LLC, Generation X, Roderick Hawkins, University Administrator and Public Engagement Executive, Millennial Dujon Smith, Venture Capital Advisor, and for Gen Z, Maria Sierra, a college student. Welcome to the table.
Thank you.
So first things first, let's clarify what we mean by the look, okay? So I was doing a little research here, and there's actually kind of a definition for it. The dictionary definition is the appearance of someone or something, especially as expressing a particular quality or being regarded in a specified way. I think the operative word here is quality. I think that's an interesting word. How does that strike you? What does it mean to you?
Quality. That's really going to be in the eye of the beholder.
Say more about that, Wendy.
Yeah, because in terms of what's the criteria for quality, I think what is that the presence or the look is about being very intentional, and also recognizing that the value system works both ways. One, how we choose to appear with an expectation that folks are going to also have an expectation of how we actually show up. So the quality of it may be, from my perspective, I think it's the whole package and very much what I want to express. And for someone else, that just may not be enough or may be too much. So I think it's kind of a slippery slope there.
Yeah, I think it evolves over time. I think about, for me, I may have been more concerned about what others thought about the quality I brought when I walked into the room. But as I've gotten older, I'm less concerned about what others think, but it's about how I feel. Do I walk, as I prepare myself to walk into a room or to walk into a space, am I confident? Am I good? Because if I'm good, then we're gonna have some fun. Whether you may not particularly care for the look or the quality that I'm getting, but the look for me, I'm happy with the look I'm bringing. So, but it took me time to get to that point. I wasn't always like that. I was very self-conscious, and very concerned about, okay, what do others think? And I'm less about that. But I agree with Wendy that it is about the eye of the beholder. It's not just events, presentations, pitches, whatever. It's not just about what you're selling or trying to present. It's also about yourself and what the recipient thinks of you or how they feel about you. So I think it evolves over time.
Yeah, that quality piece, I think, like you said, it is an interesting word for a definition anyway. That's why you got to be careful what you see out on the web. But, there's so much that goes into that. And I love what you said, Roderick, around if I feel good, then I know I'm going to bring my best. Yeah. I think it'd be kind of difficult to feel good and then just be a disaster. Not be intentional, really coming out different ways. Yeah. What do you think, Maria?
Well, the word quality really just struck me because it's like saying, oh, you have to have like a certain quality for people, a certain things for people to like you. But I was agreeing with Roderick over here that now it's more about confidence. It's about you now. So it's whatever you have, and it doesn't really matter what other people think. And it's more just about what you think you have or what you bring to the table, and what you focus on yourself. But the quality part is very daunting, just because you think you have to have a certain quality. I mean, for a job, you probably do, but it's just for me, it makes me feel quiet. It's very intimidating.
Sounds stressful, doesn't
it?
Yeah. Dijon,
Yeah,
what's
no,
occurring to you?
I agree with what's being said this far. I think when we think about the look and the quality, oftentimes we think about the physical aspects. And I think there's also so much to be said about the intangibles that you bring to the table. And I agree with you, Roderick, around how you feel. And for me, when I think about impressions and the quality that I leave with people, I want to also take into account how they feel after they've had that interaction with me. Because at the end of the day, you can never change what people think when they first see you. You might see me right now with pink hair. You might think I'm in the creative industry. You might never think that I'm in the venture capital arena. I've worked in finance. I can never change those first initial impressions or thoughts that you might have. But you best believe once our interaction is over, I know at the end of the day how I feel and how I want you to feel, that this was a genuine, authentic experience that I had with this young man, and I want to have more interactions with him in the future. So that's kind of what I focus on. How do I have a nice balance of intangible and physical parts of me that helps to create my look and the impression that I leave on you?
Dijon said, you best believe you're going to remember who you just encountered, period, point blank.
Yes.
And we can't forget who defines quality.
Yeah.
You look into you mentioned the dictionary definition. Who wrote that? I mean, really, seriously, who wrote that? Who's
Mr.com.
Who's defining that? Right.
Yeah.
Who's setting that standard? But yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost to your point, whoever has the power of the pen
Yeah.
can set the course, right? So it's really interesting, but just to know that there are others who grasp these concepts in some of the same way, it just creates a narrative that is false in so many ways, or at minimum short-sighted in so many ways. And we could talk about that. That could be a whole episode in and of
Absolutely.
itself. But there is a quote. Tell me if you've heard this before. You've only got 3 seconds to make a good impression. What goes into that? What are some of those elements? So you talked about if I feel good, that shows up. You talked about quality being daunting. You talked about physical attributes, but the 3-second rule, if you will. You've got 3 seconds to make a good impression. There's actually a book that was titled that. I think it came out in the 80s. That tells you anything. But what is the anatomy of a good first impression?
You know, Melissa, I was just thinking of the point you were just making about sort of who defined that criteria. I think whoever defined that 3-second rule, all they were really was making a declaration of how quickly the bias works. Because 3 seconds isn't enough to do anything other than judge based on preconceived notions.
Lean into the judgment,
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Go
You know,
ahead.
so,
you have
so, I,
permission.
so I think that's what we have to.
It's an up and down.
You know,
It's an up and
that is
down.
really,
3 seconds.
it's very bias generated.
Absolutely.
And also understand that the levity that goes into that is really a power dynamic.
Yes.
That we should be able to say, well, it doesn't matter. Well, it can matter. So I do think people come to the evaluation of you very quickly, but the worst and best thing that happened to us was the pandemic, right? Because it just changed the course of everything, including how we started to interact and receive each other. And all of a sudden became, even though remote, in some ways very intimate in each other's lives. So I think that whole thing of how we're evaluating someone and creating all of this judgment, I think smart people will recognize that. Don't make that determination in 3 seconds.
Absolutely. And especially for we're all people of color here, and we know. And I say this often when I talk to people that I lead with my blackness. It's not a choice. It's just the way it is. And so if I know that there are people that I'm going to interact with, I sometimes know not that it's the chip on my shoulder. It's just an understanding that I know I may walk into certain rooms and spaces, especially with there are cis white men around, that automatically, before I even open up my mouth, an impression has been made.
In a box.
And you have to fight against that. But speaking of books, a book I'm reading for a class I'm in is The Art of Woo. And I appreciate that. We talk about the impressions, but one thing I noticed in The Art of Woo, every story that is told is about a cis, white, probably heterosexual man. And I'm like, so that's the model we're following? Is that what we're doing? If that's the case, then we got some problems, you know. So, but I love how folks said, I mean, your generation, all generations are redefining that. So I think that's the beauty in where we are now. And I agree with you completely, Wendy. The pandemic forced us to, there was no first impressions. You didn't walk into rooms, you walked into a Zoom. And you were behind a screen. I got a job behind a screen.
Everybody's box was the same size.
I was worried about the neck up, not the waist, the neck down. So, you know, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
it has changed us.
Yeah.
It has changed us.
Yeah. For me, being on the tall side, like
Yeah.
I'm just shy of 6 feet, you know, I have had individuals say through others that I am intimidating. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to crawl. You know, I'm 6 feet. You know, and that's flat-footed. That's right. You know, so, and no, I'm not leaving my stilettos at the door.
Absolutely not.
Because, right? So that, you know, it really did put you, everybody would, the playing field was leveled. We were all in a 2-inch by 2-inch box. And the only thing I could judge you on is what you said.
That's right.
And if whether or not you made an attempt to at least be presentable
Right.
from the waist up.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Well,
College campus, what's happening there?
I agree with a lot of things that have been said here. I think now, over the pandemic, it's more focused on social media as well. So it's not just the person, it's not like on Zoom, it's more on things you recruit on because of the pandemic. It's, for me, I agree with you because my mom is also really tall. And so she also goes through a
I
lot.
don't know about the really part, but okay.
Well, she's tall.
I'm kidding.
She's tall. And she also goes through where people think she's intimidating. And she said to just brush it off, and which brings confidence into it too. And they've also told me that, oh, you're actually smart. After I've said whatever I've said, especially going into the nursing career. And when they use the word actually, that's when it's just not, it brings me down more than I was trying to build up my confidence. But yeah, I understand.
Who's saying, oh, you're actually smart? Is this like professors or?
The men.
The man.
The men.
The man.
The men.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have another episode called How to Clap Back.
Because we got some ammunition for you,
We
Maria.
got some
We got you,
ammunition
Maria.
for you. Oh, no, they didn't. Okay, well, we will be right back to continue this conversation right after this.
Chicagoland is filled with unique perspectives on culture and life. Each week on For the Culture, we'll delve into those perspectives with dynamic guests and engaging conversations from arts and entertainment to business to trending news to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll get into it here on For the Culture. For the Culture airs Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV 19 and streaming on cantv.org.
Welcome back to Generation Flex. Now let's dive into an example of bad first impressions. Let's kind of break that down a little bit. The giggle tells me you got stories, so we want to hear it. So describe for me, what are some examples that you've seen of really bad first impressions? Whether it was maybe somebody was coming in to see you, you know, a client or a student or professor, a job interview or what have you, an entrepreneur, right? Without giving any names or details and, you know. So what would you say are some elements of a really bad first impression?
You know, I'll own it because the example I give is my own.
Okay.
So, you know, finally going to grad school, and it's that first day of orientation, and everyone's sort of in the pit. And everything that could go wrong that way did. And so I would arrive on campus an hour later than I should have, and my car broke down. And so I ran across campus, and by the time I actually entered the room where everybody was standing up and announcing who they were with all these great careers, I was a sweaty mess, and there was only one seat left right in the front, so I couldn't even sneak in. And I sort of drugged myself across the room, plopped in my seat to only realize I was the last person to be introduced. So then I had to stand up and introduce myself. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to make it, and I'm going to get kicked out of school. It was like one of the worst impressions I think I've ever made. And I've always remembered that. If I saw anybody sort of struggling with that. So that was my real lived case.
Yeah, put some effort into it, I think, is the moral that I'm hearing of that particular story. Any other examples that you've seen?
I think a
Were it even not your own?
lack of preparation. I've done that, and I've seen that happen. An example I'm thinking of, like when I'm in a role where I hire people for different roles, right? But one thing that frustrates me is when you show up, a candidate shows up for an interview, and it's clear that they didn't do their research. They didn't do beyond what they saw on the job description. Because I think, hopefully people, I think what I'm learning, and I can say this, I will maybe say I'm a little bit flexible too, talk about generations, because I'm old school and I'm from the South too. A cover letter is important to me. And that's the first thing. So I will say this, cover letters.
Cover letters are still a thing for you.
For me, I will put a resume to
Good
the
to know.
side because
Yes.
your cover letter did not make that good first impression because I don't see you.
Exactly.
I'm reading your words. I'm reading your intentions. And if your intention is like, to whom it may concern, we're kind of done.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that, but not being nitpicky, it's simply like, did you do the work to know who we are or what this organization is doing or what this school is doing? That's important. So that's how, but I've had that people show up and they're not fully prepared for the conversation. And I've done that too. So I know because I'm hard on myself, but I also know that it's important to have that because that's your one shot in the job, and that's your one shot. If you don't do it, you don't do it. That's the example I can give. Yeah.
Yeah, and and I could totally see the connection because School of Communication requires you to be able to communicate well.
It's kind of a requirement.
It's kind of, okay.
It's up there. It's up there. Communicate.
Have you ever felt like someone took you for granted and just came any old kind of way? Came out the box any old kind of way? Yeah? Dejan?
100%. I would say, especially in the space that I'm in venture capital and entrepreneurs, and even the space that I'm working, I'm lucky that I get to focus on one specific ethnic minority group, which is really exciting. But sometimes that can come with too much relaxed environments. For me, to your point, come prepared. Please don't be tardy. Dress however you want. I don't have any sort of cookie cutter mold on how you show up, but just be confident. But then there's a certain point where things can just get too relaxed, and it's just you're taking this situation for advantage, and right now, and I just see that it's just not going to be good. And you feel that the inauthentic energy, and you realize, hey, like this is not going to be good for either party. So I'm just going to have to cut this conversation off or cut this interaction short.
Yeah, kind of feels disrespectful.
It does.
Like you didn't think. You got it twisted.
Yeah. Especially when you have to put your name on the line for that individual.
That part.
And then they become a reflection of you and your work, and then it deters others from being helped as well.
Okay, I want to get back into another point that you made just there. You said, dress any old kind of way. I don't really care. Really? Do you really want to give that much of a leash?
For me, yes. I would say as long as you come confident in what you are wearing and it is appropriate for the particular environment. There was a long time I've worked in hedge funds, accounting firms, and there was such a cookie cutter mold of what you look like. When I was in the hedge fund, everyone had the same Patagonia gray, the blue, the navy pant. Everyone looked the exact same, and I did not like that. I wanted to be in a very diverse and inclusive environment where everyone had their different collective cultural consciousness. We were all bringing new ideas, and when everyone looked the same and you got that group think, it's because everyone was showing up looking the exact same. So I like a diversity of how you show up and express yourself through clothing in a respectful manner. Like, don't come in like some short shorts into the board meeting.
Well,
but
yeah, I just kind of want to get that out there.
Yeah, exactly. But
but the whole FTX debacle and the CEO, like, the interviews in the shorts and the crumpled tees, and we talking about somebody who's sitting on top of billions of dollars. That's why I asked that question, because I think we have kind of gotten off balance a little bit more. I don't know if I would really be taking somebody really seriously if we were talking about a high stakes deal.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you didn't think enough to come in at least press your pants. you like cover letters. I don't want to see wrinkles.
Right.
Like at least press, right?
yeah.
Like,
But that's the interesting point. And so a lot of those examples that you've seen with the Adam Newmans, the Steve Jobs, have been able to show up in any type of way as white men with privilege and power.
We can wrap it
and
up,
there's been a
right?
longer,
is it time to go? Did that what he
going.
dropped
there's
the
been a
mic?
longer
Yeah.
narrative, especially for women and minorities, to show up in a certain type of way. Seeing
Yes.
laws around the hair that we can have in a
Yes.
corporate environment. We've always had to do so much more to appease a European standard of beauty, respectability, whatever it might be, to show up. So even those examples are just crazy. A lot of those times and a lot of those examples, those individuals can show up any kind of way. And if we showed up in those same way,
You need an act of Congress.
yeah.
Oh, you wouldn't get
Literally.
past
Yeah.
You need an
security.
act of Congress, the Crown Act. You really need an act of Congress. You can show up with that, what we rocking with. You too. I mean,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
who defined it? And of course, the people that defined it can buck it, can
Yes.
change it around and flip it up for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, something else I thought about, I've been in organizations where there were a lot of relationships, a lot of nepotism. And so that's something else to be said about that type of privilege in terms of folks making a lot of assumptions,
Yep.
being very comfortable, sort of not giving any respect to the process and just taking full advantage. And the other one I'd like us to remember about the whole ideology of first impressions, it's based on assumption still of bias, because we're assuming everyone is sighted the same.
Yes.
Everyone is hearing the same.
Yep.
You know, everyone can even see all the colors the same. And so that's what I mean, as we've gotten smarter about this, we're realizing just the whole range of diversity, including neurodiversity, and how that shows up in not only people making a first impression, but how we're receiving those impressions.
Such an important point. Such an important point. And that is where, diversity and inclusion and equity, it permeates everything.
Everything.
Everything. And, the statistics show up and shows you that some people are definitely being left out of the equation or opting out because I'm getting judged the same way over and over and over again. And people think that if I can't do it this way, then I'm not worthy or I'm not, capable. That first impression is out the door. It's like, oh, you're missing an arm? You can't do this. Well, yeah. It's like, isn't there a commercial that says, watch me? Watch me.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Maria?
Oh, as a first generation and older sibling, that really does. I really do resonate with everything because I don't really have like an older sibling or like older cousins. I'm literally the first one. I didn't know anything about like colleges, especially in the pandemic. I didn't have anything. But I seen social media, like my other people, which are white people, they did have a lot of resources and I didn't. I'm a Latina first generation. My parents don't know any English, so they couldn't help me. And so I had to go out of my way and do it because a lot of people weren't helping me. So I do relate, and it's good that I'm not the only one to feel.
Well, that 4.0 says.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it says a lot about, so
Yes,
if you
I
don't have
can.
those certain,
Yeah.
if you don't have that certain like knowledge, then they take you out of the equation like right away.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely their loss.
Absolutely.
Because people as brilliant as you are showing up every day and are being discounted, and they're settling actually for mediocrity.
That's correct.
So at some point in time, there will be more of you there than there, and that's the power dynamic that is shifting. So we applaud you.
You're part of the wave. You're part of the shift. So step in your power, sister.
That's
Seriously,
right.
step into
We're
it.
counting on you, Maria.
So as we draw this segment to a close, what's some advice? You mentioned being a Latina, and what's some advice that you would say in terms of having that right look, making that good first impression? I'd like for all of you really to weigh in on what's that one piece of advice quickly.
Don't care what anyone says, just do what you have to do. And if you have people, the more people you have, the better, especially in your same situation, but just do it. Just do it. Doesn't
Just
matter.
do it. Just do it. Roger?
Be authentically you. Authentically you.
Absolutely. Dijon?
I'd agree as well, and I would say specifically women and minorities, there's some learning that we have to do within the society to create our own new standards to show up authentically.
And I'm in agreement. Own you. We are in a universe now where the new power shoe is a sneaker or a flat or a boot. And so, and so own that and believe in your head that you own that and that you are more than enough.
Absolutely.
Own it. Authenticity. Do you. Be you. Great place to end it. We'll be right back.
On this week's In the Arena, I'll be speaking with multi-hyphenate leader Priya Shaw. Take a look.
When I was younger, I never saw anybody that looked like me, and I wish I did so that I could have a bit more empowerment about who I was and how I could be accepted. I wouldn't have gone through a lot of the thoughts that I did have.
Agreed.
And to be able to bring that to other children and people in general is just such a gift.
Welcome back. As the saying goes, people do business with people they like. The look can be a deal maker or a bridge builder. An entry in UrbanDictionary.com defined the look as something that makes you unique, alongside personality and intelligence. Having the look is a bit like being empowered. You know that you know when you know that you've seen it. And everyone has a different definition and experience of it. If indeed it only takes 3 seconds to make a good impression, then it's best to keep things simple. The look begins with self-confidence that exudes from within. Make the exterior match the interior. When people lay eyes on you and things begin to unfold as you imagine, whether it's a career opportunity, winning a new client, or being asked on a date, that's when you know you've got the look. I'd like to thank my guests, Wendy, Dijon, Maria, and Roderick, for an amazing discussion. Until next time, Chicago, remember to live, laugh, and love.